I'm Ed Henry in for Brett Baer, and this is a Fox News alert. As dawn breaks over Indonesia's capital, search and rescue crews are gearing up for an extremely tough day and an intensifying search. They're hunting for Air Asia Flight 8501, a Singapore-bound Airbus A320 that vanished in some storm clouds without issuing a distress call. 162 people were on the plane, and at this hour, fears are being rekindled about just how safe the world's aviation system is, as the American government has been officially called in to help with a widening search for answers. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott has our lead story tonight.
A desperate search for missing Air Asia Flight 8501 is set to rev up right now, some 2 days after the plane first disappeared. While some debris and oil has been spotted off the coast of Indonesia, there's no confirmation that's linked to the incident. With dozens of helicopters, planes, and ships in the hunt, there is still no trace.
It is no issue, of course, in operation in the sea, especially in the bad weather like this.
The Air Asia plane carried 162 passengers, most of them Indonesian, but with other nationalities on board as well, including British and French. The plane was set to fly Sunday morning between the Indonesian city of Surabaya and Singapore until things went wrong. At 5:36 local time, the plane took off. At 6:12, a route change was requested to fly over bad weather. With other planes already there, the request was denied. Sometime after 6:17, radio and radar contact was lost. There was no distress call. While the exact cause of the apparent crash is still unknown, authorities say they believe the plane went down and is on the bottom of the Java Sea.
Until we find the aircraft, we know what went wrong, then we'll look into it and see, what we need to improve, if we need to improve.
In fact, Air Asia Airline has a good safety record, as does the Airbus aircraft involved. Little consolation for the families of the passengers on the flight. It is feared there will be no survivors. Passengers flying the same route Monday were nervous.
It was horrible. We already booked the flight 3 months ago, so there was nothing that we could do, just pray.
All this comes during a bad year for aviation in Southeast Asia. Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 disappeared in the Indian Ocean in March. Malaysia Airlines flight MH17 was downed over Ukraine in July. And now the Malaysia-based Air Asia flight has disappeared as well. Indonesia has asked the U.S. for aid in efforts to find the plane. Washington has agreed to help.
Our embassy, of course, is focused on finding ways to be responsive. Of course, we've been in close contact with Indonesian officials since the disappearance of the plane.
A short time ago, the Pentagon elaborated on what could be the U.S. contribution to the Air Asia hunt. They are saying they are ready to deploy air, surface, and subsurface detection capabilities, all sent out by the Navy's 7th Fleet. In the meantime, what is being described as an expanded search led by Indonesian authorities is set to resume. Ed.
Greg Palcott live for us tonight. Thank you, Greg. Now to the Adriatic, the scene of an incredible Greek ferry fire. The seaboard witnessed human frailty as well as extraordinary courage. Correspondent John Huddy has the story of a dramatic rescue and those who sadly were not so lucky.
Smoke billowed from the Norman Atlantic ferry as it burned while adrift on the Adriatic Sea. The deadly ordeal came to an end earlier today as the last of the more than 450 passengers and crew were rescued. At least 10 people were killed during the 24-hour nightmare, dozens of others injured. The spokesman for Greece's Coast Guard said, quote, superhuman efforts were made in the rescue operation, hampered by gale force winds, rough seas, and blinding rain and hail. Helicopters struggled to lift passengers up one by one from the burning ferry. One man said people trampled each other to get to the choppers. Others waited on the ferry's upper deck to be rescued. The fire started in the ship's parking bay early Sunday morning and quickly spread. Survivors said the fire alarms didn't go off until after the cabins filled with smoke and that there were no crew members to give directives. This Italian official said many passengers were in shock after being rescued, while others suffered from hypothermia, the blankets helping only so much after a long and deadly ordeal. And there are reports that the ferry may have had safety deficiencies, including problems with the fire doors and its emergency systems. A criminal investigation will look into that. Also, if negligence was involved, and of course, how the fire started in the first place. Ed?
John Huddy in our Mideast Bureau tonight. Thank you, John. In recent days, police officers in New York City have been figuratively turning the tables, quite literally turning their backs on Mayor Bill de Blasio. That continued today at Madison Square Garden at a graduation ceremony for new officers where a small number of audience members turned their backs on the mayor. Correspondent David Lee Miller has that story from New York.
It was a tough crowd for New York Mayor Bill de Blasio. As he approached the podium to begin his speech before 800 graduating police officers, some friends and family in the audience booed. Even as he spoke, there were hecklers.
You will confront all the problems that plague our society, problems that you didn't create.
That's when someone shouted, "You did," and others responded with applause. The mayor never acknowledged the chilly atmosphere. Instead, he focused on the contribution of police.
It's a noble calling because you stand for everyone around you. You serve the people of the greatest city in the world.
Only 2 days earlier, at the funeral for Officer Rafael Ramos, police turned their back on the mayor as he spoke. The police union and others blamed de Blasio for creating an environment that led to the shooting of 2 police officers. Police Commissioner Bill Bratton said it was the wrong time and place to make a political statement.
That funeral was held to honor Officer Ramos, and to bring politics or to bring issues into that event, I think, was very inappropriate, and I do not support it.
Former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani also criticized police for turning their backs on de Blasio. But he said de Blasio made a mistake by giving the impression he sides with anti-police demonstrators.
I do believe Mayor de Blasio should apologize to the New York City Police Department. I said it day one, and I think he'd get this over with if he did it.
Today, there was no such mea culpa. Some of those who came to the graduation ceremony want the mayor to show more solidarity with police.
We need the support of the higher-ups. The mayor has to get behind these uniformed officers.
I can't quite say he has blood on his hands, but I think he's played a very large part in what's taken place.
As the mayor tries to improve his relationship with the NYPD, he announced that $120,000 has been raised for the families of the 2 slain officers. And just moments ago, it was announced that tomorrow the mayor is going to meet with high-ranking union officials as well as the police commissioner, possibly an effort to mend fences. And lastly, we learned today that the funeral for Officer Liu is going to take place Sunday in Brooklyn. Final arrangements had been delayed because some family members have had to travel from as far away as China. Ed.
Thanks for all those late-breaking details tonight. David Lee Miller, live in New York City. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, 2 men opened fire on a police car last night. They traded gunshots, but nobody was hurt. One suspect was arrested, and authorities are still looking for a second suspect. No motive has been released yet. With the new year comes a new Congress and new challenges for President Obama. Tonight, he's fired an opening salvo at Republicans, warning he's about to sharpen his veto pen. Correspondent Dan Springer has that story tonight from Honolulu, where the president is on vacation.
If 2014 can be summed up as the year of the pen and phone dominated by executive action, 2015 may see another pen running out of ink, the veto pen. Just before leaving for his 2-week vacation in Hawaii, President Obama sat down with NPR and threw down the gauntlet.
There are going to be some areas where we disagree. And I haven't used the veto pen very often since I've been in office, partly because legislation that I objected to was typically blocked in the Senate even after the House took over, Republicans took over the House. Now I suspect there are going to be some times where I've got to pull that pen out.
Come January, Republicans will take control of the Senate and have a larger majority in the House. GOP leaders say among their first priorities are striking some of the provisions of Obamacare and finally passing the Keystone XL pipeline. In response to the veto threat, incoming Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell released a statement saying bipartisan jobs bills will see the light of day and will make it to the president's desk. There's a lot we can get done together if the president puts his famous pen to use signing bills rather than vetoing legislation his liberal allies don't like.
The country would be well served if the president would extend an olive branch to Congress and leave his veto pen in his pocket.
In his first 6 years in office, President Obama has vetoed just 2 bills, a stark contrast from most recent presidents. Mr. Obama said he's most likely to veto legislation that would unravel existing laws and regulations. Potential GOP targets include executive action that cut carbon emissions and also green cards for up to 5 million illegal immigrants. In a video clip released by NPR, the president took some blame for losing the Senate.
I think we had a great record for members of Congress to run on, and I don't think we, myself, and the Democratic Party made as good of a case as we should have. Now you've got Republicans in a position where it's not enough for them simply to grind the wheels of Congress to a halt and then blame me.
Republicans say they welcome that new role and argue that the reason why President Obama has had so few vetoes is because Harry Reid has been a de facto veto as Senate Majority Leader. Ed?
You're live tonight on Waikiki Beach. I know it well. Good to see you, Dan. For a majority of Americans, 2014 was not so bad. A new Fox poll finds 57% of respondents say it was a good year for their family. Up next, the president all but declares mission accomplished in Afghanistan. But is the war really over? First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. KTVU in San Francisco has the story of a shark attack survivor. On the central California coast, a juvenile great white shark dragged a surfer underwater and bit him in the hip. The man fashioned a tourniquet and paddled to shore, where 2 doctors who happened to be on the beach called 911 and helped him until other medical personnel arrived. WFLD in Chicago has the rescue of 4 construction workers hurt this morning when an I-beam collapsed. 3 of the men were seriously injured. This is a live look at Orlando from WOFL. The big story there tonight is the St. Cloud Police Department celebration of a 6-year-old girl who's in need of a heart transplant. Her condition has been deteriorating, so the community has rallied together to celebrate her birthday a little early. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back with more news.